Thank you so much for joining another live stream for intensivecarehotline.com. Today's live stream is about I signed for my husband to be taken off life support, and now I feel like I murdered him. Now, for all the for the YouTube algorithm, that's not a nice headline, because I know YouTube doesn't want content creators to talk about death and dying. It's not very popular, let alone about murder. But obviously, I'm creating content here that comes straight from the mouth of our clients, from our readers, and that's why I couldn't really water down this headline today, because I'm discussing real case scenarios, real world scenarios, where clients tell us their grievances and we deal with them. That's why I couldn't water it down. Maybe we won't get too many viewers today because YouTube pushes down this video because it's not quote unquote sexy, and it doesn't favor mainstream news. Anyway, we'll talk about this topic today anyway, and hopefully you'll get some value out of it. So before we go into today's topic, I quickly want to talk about, what makes me qualified to talk about today's topic. So I'm a critical care nurse by background. I have worked in critical care / intensive care for over 20 years. And out of those over 20 years, I worked for over 5 years as a nurse unit manager in intensive care. I'm the founder of intensivecarehotline.com, where we are providing consulting and advocacy for families in intensive care all around the world. We have been operating now since 2013, so next year will be our 10th year. So we are, helping families in intensive care all around the world every day of the year. I'm also the founder of Intensive Care at Home, where we provide home intensive care for predominantly long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomies. We have been operating intensive care at home since 2014, predominantly on the East Coast in Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, but we're also operating all around the country in Australia. So that's a little bit about me. Again, today's topic is I signed for my husband to be taken off life support, and now I feel like we have murdered him. So let me give you some context here. We are talking to people, we're talking to families in intensive care all around the world, every day, all year round. And we have so many families coming to us that want to know, what they should be doing in a situation like this, or we have families coming to us and say, look, ICU has told us, we need to make the decision whether we should do a tracheostomy for my loved one, or whether we should focus on comfort care, hospice care, end-of-life care, whatever euphemism you want to give that, when hospitals say, well, we think it's quote unquote in the best interest to kill your mom, your dad, your family member. We are faced with those questions again every day of the year, because that's what families unfortunately are dealing with in intensive care more often than not. And in order for you to avoid a situation where you have nagging regrets, like this viewer or this reader wrote us, again, I'll read this out again. This is, the headline for today's YouTube live is verbatim from a reader that sent us that email, right? She says, I signed for my husband to be taken off life support, and now I feel like we murdered him. No family wants to be in a situation like that. No family wants to feel regrets like that. Definitely not, because that's a terrible situation to be in. So how should you approach this so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power, and influence when you have a loved one in intensive care? Because that's what all families want, and that's what it comes down to. So how can you approach this rationally so that you don't have regrets, and you're not faced 12 months down the line, oh my goodness, have I killed my husband? Have I killed my spouse? Have I killed my brother? Have I killed my sister? Have I killed my child? You certainly don't want to be in doubts about it. So, okay, so let's just start with some metrics here that you can easily understand. Research suggests that about 90% of intensive care patients survive. So that's 9 out of 10 leaving intensive care alive. It's only, quote unquote, only 1 out of 10 surviving. So the odds are in your loved one's favor. Of course, a lot of it depends what the prognosis is. For example, especially with COVID, the mortality of COVID has been much higher, or if someone goes into ICU with ARDS, again, the mortality is much higher. So yes, you got to break it down. Of course, you can't just say 90% of ICU patients survive, but as a rule of thumb, those are the numbers. So that's number one. Number two, if you are faced with a situation where the ICU team says, look, you got to sign a DNR, you got to give consent to end of life for your family member, you got to think twice. When someone has passed away, they're gone forever as far as we know. So you got to think about what potential regrets would you have if you feel like you need to make a decision now. Now, other topics that I've spoken about over the years, and there would be another YouTube live, that I've done in the last couple of years where I had a topic, the difference between real and perceived end-of-life situations. So there's a big difference in ICU between real, quote-unquote real, and quote-unquote perceived end-of-life situations. And you got to find out which category your loved one is in. So for example, a quote-unquote real end-of-life situation means no therapy, no treatment, no nothing can save your loved one's life. They're going to die, full stop, right? No transfer to another hospital, no fancy treatment, no nothing will save your loved one's life. They're going to die within the next 24 to 48 hours. And here are the facts. Why? You got to obviously listen to the intensive care team, why they think that's the case. And I can tell you from experience, intensive care teams are pretty poor at predicting when someone is going to die. I would never, expect, even with all this experience, to say when someone is going to die. Yes, there are situations where you can, with reasonable certainty, predict when someone's going to die. But the facts need to be there. Are there inotropes used? Are there vasopressors used? How much FiO2 is someone on a ventilator? What are blood results? What are arterial blood gas results? What medications is someone on? You got to get the facts. So that's a quote-unquote real end-of-life situation. A quote-unquote perceived end-of-life situation is when someone might die, or it's someone's perception that someone is going to die without having the real data, right? And that's the category that most patients in intensive care are in, that they might die, but that's a perception, not based on facts. So you got to work out which situation your loved one is in. Is it real or is it perceived? Big difference. And only once you found out whether it's real or perceived, only then should you take your next steps. Should you give consent to your loved one dying? Because again, that's when the regret might come in. If you haven't given them a shot to survive, there's no return from that. And intensive care teams will tell you that, intensive care teams will tell you that, even if your loved one will survive, that they may not have any quote-unquote quality of life. Again, another perception. What is quality of life? What is it? Probably different for you than it is for me. So who are intensive care teams to say that, oh, this person won't have any quality of life if they do survive intensive care? You don't know what's acceptable for your loved one or for you as a family. That's something that's up to you, not up to intensive care teams, right? Intensive care teams are no good at understanding what's happening outside of intensive care. And the reason I bring it up is, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are running a service, intensive care at home, for predominantly long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy at home, but also for other medically complex clients that need intensive care at home in order to keep them out of ICU or take them home from ICU. That also includes non-invasive ventilation with BiPAP and CPAP. That also includes home TPN or home infusion services, right? IV antibiotics and so forth. So, it's not a one size fits all, and you got to look at quality of life very nuanced and with information that's important for you and for your loved one and for you as a family. So if you are finding yourself in a situation where intensive care teams say, well, we think the only option for your loved one is to have comfort care or end of life care, again, they'll be using all sorts of euphemisms to convince you that death for your loved one is quote unquote in their best interest. I've yet to find out, how it's in someone's best interest to die. I've yet to find out. But if you're in a situation like that, you need to get opinions, you need to get facts, you need to look outside of the box, and you need to get an independent assessment, which we can help you with. You need to get independent advice that goes outside of this little intensive care bubble that's filled with, finance pressures, budget pressures, bed pressures, staff pressures, political pressures. ICUs are highly political. You need to get away from that, and you need to look at your bubble, which is what does your loved one want? What does your family want? That's what you need to look at. And what are resources you can tap into, such as intensive care at home, such as getting a second opinion, such as talking to people who know what can happen outside of ICU if someone survives, right? And that's what we think we can help you with. So how should you tackle this in more practical terms? If you are faced with a situation where the intensive care team is trying to put pressure on you in order to have end-of-life care for your loved one instead of giving them a shot at life. So if you are faced with a situation, we should either do a tracheostomy now because it's been 10 days of mechanical ventilation, your loved one can't come off the ventilator. So we either do a tracheostomy, but we think it's quote unquote in the best interest for your loved one to die, right? Well, again, you need to try and get all the facts. We can help you by looking at medical records. We can help you by asking all the right questions to the intensive care team. If we talk to the intensive care team, we're asking questions that you probably haven't even considered asking, because by understanding intensive care inside out, we have a list of questions to go through where intensive care teams pretty quickly know, well, we understand intensive care just as well as they do, right? So, and then once you've made it, once you're feeling like you can make a decision or you want to make a decision, you got to think about the following. Before you make a decision, you got to think, would you regret making that decision 12 months from today? And to put it more bluntly, would you regret giving consent to killing your loved one today? Would you regret that in 12 months' time? And you can probably answer that question pretty quickly. If you think it's a perceived end-of-life situation instead of a real end-of-life situation, which is just what I talked about a minute ago, you know the answer already. And what we often do, when families come to us and they say, hey, look, I really think I've made the wrong decision last year by giving consent to a DNR, by giving consent to end of life, our approach to that is, well, do you want us to look at medical records? And then we can find out whether it was the right thing to do or whether it wasn't the right thing to do, whether there would have been other treatment options whether they told you the full story, because that's another thing you might have heard me say before. ICUs are only telling you half of the story unless you're asking the right questions. And that's what we can help you with here. We can ask the right questions. We know about your rights. If ICUs are telling you, well, you've only got those two options, well, really? Really? Well, what about extubation? What about maybe going on ECMO? What about, this treatment or that treatment? We can help you with all of that. Another thing that we can do if you're in doubt, if you're faced with these challenges, we can look at medical records, right? Because what we do is, again, if someone comes to us after 12 months and says, oh, look, I really think I've potentially killed my husband or my spouse, or by giving consent to taking my family member off life support, well, we suggest, well, we can look at medical records and find out whether that is the case, right? On the other hand, we'd rather look at medical records when your loved one is around, because then we can make assessments in real time and you can make the right decisions without any regrets. Okay, so I hope that sort of illustrates in terms of what the options are, but also don't put yourself under pressure in terms of, oh, the intensive care team said, I need to make a decision by tomorrow 1 o'clock. Don't play the game of them asking you to jump and you ask how high. Don't play that game. Play the game of, well, I'm asking you, intensive care, to do the best for my loved one. That's a much better question to ask. Much better question to ask. You need to stay in control of the fate and destiny of your loved one and your family. You need to stay in control. And it starts by asking the right questions. For example, I think I did a YouTube live last week or the week before where one of the questions was, the ICU team told me my dad will never come off the ventilator. What a whole lot of rubbish in that situation. We got the evidence pretty quickly that, that's couldn't be any further from the truth. Right? So, you got to ask the right questions. You got to get yourself informed. Only with the right questions can you really get control. Because you will see, once you start asking the right questions, how will they react? How will they react? Will they get defensive? Are they trying to play avoidance? Are they working with you? Prematurely killing patients is one of the worst things that happens in ICU, And I think what you might want to do is, got to get yourself informed. You got to know that 90% of intensive care patients approximately survive. You got to know that there are services out there like intensive care at home, and you can't take no for an answer. Once someone is dead, again, there's no return from that as far as I'm aware. And you got to get all the facts why potentially your loved one might be dying. Might be dying. And once a tracheostomy has been done, because it often comes down to that in intensive care, either end of life or a tracheostomy, that's often where the crossroads happen, and let's do a tracheostomy in most cases, then that buys you all the time in the world. Buys you all the time in the world, or your loved one. So, because you don't want us to do a medical record review 12 months down the line, you want us to do a medical record review in real time, so we can give you real-time advice. Real-time advice. Not 12 months later, that advice once your loved one has gone. There's the other question that you need to ask yourself is, what's the hurry to talk about end of life? What's the rush? What's the rush in killing people? ICUs, in some ICUs, it can't happen quick enough. They tell you your loved one hasn't even been there for half an hour, and they also give you the doom and gloom talk. They're trying to stay in control of the narrative, of what's going to happen in ICU. Well, you need to take control of your narrative, which is, you want the best for your loved one. And if ICU tells you that it's quote unquote in the best interest for your loved one to die, you should question that narrative big time. Now, if you have any questions so far, please type them into the chat pad and I will answer them right here and then. You can also dial in live on the show if you like. I'll give you some numbers. If you are in Australia, you can call live into the show now on 041 094 2230. That is again Australia, 041 094 2230. If you're in the US or Canada, you can call in live on the show now, 415 915 0090. That is again 415 915 0090. And if you're in the UK, you can dial in live on the show on 0118 324 3018. That is again 0118 324 3018. Looking forward to getting some questions. But if you don't want to get it on the phone, you can just type the questions into your chat pad. Now, while I'm waiting for your questions, also other issues are things like obviously the medical records in real time, and what I mean by that is in this day and age, it should just be a link to a website with a username and a password, and you should have access to medical records in real time and really pretty quickly. If sometimes hospitals tell you, well, there's got to be a 30-day request, that's just a whole lot of nonsense. They've got the medical records sitting behind a URL. Right? They've got medical records behind a URL. Simple as that. They should just send you a link to a URL to a website with a username and a password, and you should have access to the medical records in no time. If they're not doing that, you should be asking yourself, why not? Why are they not doing that? What is it that they have to hide? Right? So you have way more power than you think you have if you are doing the right things. If you're asking the right questions, you have a lot of power here. But you got to use it. Power is only potential knowledge if you use it. You got to use the knowledge. So, okay. So make decisions today that you don't regret in 12 months' time. That's how I would approach it. I can't stress this highly enough, because for whatever reason, hi Helene, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a while since I've been on your podcast, but I'm glad I found you again.
Right.
I was getting the time messed up.
Right. You are now live on the show. You get that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Great.
I was listening to you and pretty much just wanted to reiterate what you were saying about how so many people are dying in ICU because of not being informed and making the right choices. And that pretty much was the same with my mom, my late mother, and I at the time. I was being forced to change her directive to do not resuscitate, but yet behind the scenes they were giving her drugs, medications that I didn't even know what it was. I mean, it was really a way to cover up malpractice that they had caused her. And I was even lied to that she could not go home with being on a ventilator. The other option they wanted me to do is to put her in a long-term care and try to make me feel guilty. Well, to not, I mean, I couldn't afford to do that out of pocket either. Even though she had insurance, but still there was going to be an expense on the family end, and I really couldn't afford it. And so they tried to put me on a guilt trip with that. And when this was happening, my mom was actually on 1% room air. She was breathing on her own, and it was 98 to 100%.
Right.
And they didn't want to decannulate her, and they wanted to keep her on a feeding tube. And the only way I could get her out of there was to do an emergency transfer to an LTAC. And once she was there, they told me she was too well to be at an LTAC. And the pulmonary doctor would never come and speak with me. It was like they was just riding her insurance out for money. And a couple of months ago, I requested her medical records at the LTAC a second time, and I could tell the difference that there were documents that had been deleted. And have you ever seen medical records where there were blank pages?
Not really.
I'm
Not really.
asking, have you ever seen that before?
Not really. We're reviewing
Yeah,
medical records here all the time. I mean, if they came back blank, we would say, well, what's happening here? But no, I have not seen blank medical records, really.
Yeah, deleted. They were deleted. It was like blank pages. And I remember certain pages that had diagnoses that the primary hospital never told me about. So that was a cover-up. And also, I shared with you before, they caused my mother to have hypoxia, encephalopathy, brain damage. And that's why she was on the ventilator as long as she was. They were covering up. And being her durable power of returning at the primary hospital, I was being threatened by pulmonologists that they were going to gang up against. They actually ganged up against me to override my decisions as her durable power of returning. They caused a lot of damages, and then they wanted to throw her out of the hospital. And I'm like, no. I said, she's not breathing right. She's very lethargic. And I think they tried to throw us out from 8:30 that morning to 9:30 that night, and the next day she coded. So they had to keep her. But yet, since they did the illegal, unlawful discharge, they wouldn't touch her. So she wasn't able to get the medicines that she needed. Her heart rate was definitely high, and they did nothing about it. But other than try to blame me for aspiration pneumonia, which they caused while she was in the hospital.
Right.
And that's the hard part. Like you were saying that how people, there are family members who come back and have you to look at medical records to see if their loved one could have survived, been weaned off the vent and have life thereafter. And that is one of the things that bothers me, because I almost bought their lives too, but I did, because I was able to eventually bring my mother home, and on room air, she was breathing 98 to 100% O2 stats, because I had the pulse, pumped your pulse thing, you put on the finger and check the heart rate, but the part that I really took her out, they were giving her fentanyl, and I didn't even know what fentanyl was. And that's a way to end somebody's life too, because it was causing her to have shallow breathing. Plus, she ended up getting at least 4 different fatal infections.
Right.
And one of them was MRSA.
Sure.
And she got septic shock. So and she was 84, so much was working against her, you know. But the sad part about it, they were trying to blame me, trying to make me the scapegoat. And I think that is so wrong. I mean, it's hard enough to see a loved one in those predicaments, and then for the doctors to try to, you know, target you and make you their scapegoat. I think that is so horrific, and it's unimaginable.
Yeah.
And also, I have been advocating for my mom, and since I kept saying my mother was murdered, you know, and because I kept saying iatrogenic death dash murder, but it's unfortunate. I found out I have to say criminal death.
Of course.
Because it was a criminal act, and that's the part I didn't realize. So it's all, you really gotta dot the I's and cross the T's when you are seeking advocacy and help. But you know, and it did a number on me, as I shared with you before, and it really caused me to have post-traumatic stress. Because it was horrible. I mean, not only was my mother being assaulted and abused, I was too.
Of course.
You know, they attacked the family too, because you know one of the tactics to take charge over someone is to divide and conquer. And so there were many doctors and nurses and CNAs who were threatening me, bullying me, trying to get me to abandon my mother. And I'm like, no. And I had to suck it up. I had to hold a lot in because I knew she wouldn't have a chance if I wasn't there to see what was going on. And that put a toll on me. But I'm doing so much better, by God's grace, so much better. And I'm hoping that there will be justice. And one of the main hospitals that she was in at the worst, you know, that hospital has been closed down totally. And one of their sisters' hospitals been closed down totally.
Mm-hmm.
They're not telling the public why. For patients or family members for patients who have been in those hospitals, we all know why. We know the truth.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things are intentional. It's to reduce illnesses in order to profit, which, in other words, they're intentionally causing harm to profit, and that's illegal.
Yes, and there's
It's
also
somebody's life.
right. There's also an element of, I believe, almost nowadays, for lack of a better term, population. I call it population control.
Control. Yeah.
Right. You know,
yeah, but that's I still think it's illegal. You know. And then, but see, what I witnessed by them giving my mother excessive food overload, making her bed down, not moving her around, giving her the wrong antibiotic. To me, that's torture.
right.
So that takes it to a whole nother level. You know, I mean, who are we as a people?
Absolutely.
If we're torture, I mean, that's what I don't get. This is torture.
Yeah.
You know, excessive fluid overload it's like it's drowning. You're infiltrating somebody's lung. How can they breathe? They can't. And then there's the terror of it. And you see, and if you ever almost drown, you know what that's like.
For sure.
Which I have been, you know, I'm almost drowned as a kid. So I know what my mother was going through. And then to put hospital restraints beyond, 12 hours. And it was not even, at times it wasn't even the decision of a doctor. It was nurses. Everything was at will. Whatever you want to do. And they did it. And can you imagine, which I know you can't, but to have a tube going down your throat, you can barely have a finger down your throat if you're not gagged.
Yeah.
And you did all of this intentionally for money?
Yeah.
I think that's criminal, it's evil, and they should be held accountable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of good things happening in hospitals, like I always say, but there's also a lot of bad things happening in hospital. And, our job here is to, disclose the bad things that are happening.
But see, one of the things you always advocate for is definitely fight for life. And I'm gonna be honest with you. Um, there were times where I saw that was so horrendous. Sometimes I even wondered, should I just go ahead and let her pass
Sure,
away?
sure.
But I knew my mom because that was torture. It was like, and the thing is, I never knew how they were going to come at her again. It was like ganged up against her and me because I was her advocate. But I'm so glad I made the decision to do what was right and to fight for her life. Because I said, one thing will come out of this. What they're doing intentionally that is illegal, it's going to expose it. Sometimes, I just look at it, God just chose my mom and I. So, because a lot of people, like they're elderly or disabled, a lot of and they don't have anyone there with them, hey, they just fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
That was easy. That was a hit and run. But for those who have someone with them, that's more difficult. And they're counting on the loved ones to leave, to go to work or go and see about their children or something. Well, it was like I was in a position, I didn't have any of that to worry about. What to be with my mom, because I was with her anyway, taking care of her. So I was able to see a lot. Not just what was going on with her, but other patients.
Of course.
Where there were kangaroo pumps. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. You are tuned in to what's happening to other patients too, because of your experience.
I saw a pattern of excessive fluid overload. Which if anybody's got it, you need oxygen. Put them on the vent. I saw how it being given kangaroo or having malfunction kangaroo pumps where it may give you the feeding but not the water, which will cause kidney failure, UTI infections, sepsis. I saw it. It's like I was allowed to see all their schemes, many of their schemes. Many of their schemes. It was intentional. And when I started speaking up and calling it out, because like even with excessive fluid overload, whoever placed that order, they have to also put in the order when stop it. That wasn't happening for my mom. And they wouldn't tell me who placed the order. They wouldn't tell me, they say, well, the doctor ordered it and we can't stop it. Well, who is the doctor? When are they going to discontinue it?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I had to speak with the chief medical director to get them to stop it, or gave them another excessive antibiotics, which can cause immune deficiency. So if you get any kind of infection, it's not going to fight anything off. So a lot of people can die that way.
Yeah.
Which is another way of the population control.
Absolutely.
But I just wanted to share that with you. I'm not going to keep you, but I just wanted to share.
Yeah, no, I think it's very important that we hear from you, Helene, here, because I'm waffling along, just talking about emails that I'm getting and clients that I'm talking to, but I think it's always good to get someone else to chime in and share their experience. I think it's invaluable.
It's such a betrayal of trust.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
It's also a betrayal of, life, I believe, is sacred.
Yeah, it is. And that was the miracle. In spite of all the things that they were doing to her, I was praying. I'm like, Lord, you're the breath of life. Just breathe for her. Just breathe for her. And I saw a miracle. In spite of I saw a lot of wrong and evilness, I saw a lot of miracles and divine intervention. And that's the other part. Like, one thing I always hear from you is hope. Always have hope. Always have faith that it's going to get better, that your loved one can come off that ventilator or whatever is needed. You know, what they did to her even damaged her heart, her brain. I mean, it was like internal, it was like torture that was done internally where you can't see it. If somebody's, using a knife or a gun, you're going to see the wound. Internal, you can't see it. But it's damaging your organ.
Yeah.
Like I showed you, like overusing a bypass machine to try to cause her lungs to collapse. Knowing she had ARD from being her respiratory overload. Knowing she had ARD from another injury that happened at another hospital in 2012. I mean, that was just, and she's 84 years old. She's spiritual.
Right.
And then to be straight, that's held captive. And like you always said, they could be transferred. No. Here in America, I tried to get her transferred out of that hospital, and I was told if I say they were denied because if they could do this, provide the same service, it's denied. But these people are using excessive force. That's illegal. So
of course.
That was the catch to it.
Right. Yeah.
But okay, so I just want to give you my take on it.
I appreciate your input. I think it's invaluable hearing from someone on this call, who's lived through it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, and Merry Christmas to you.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you as well. Bit early, but we're heading there very fast. Yeah, no, I wish you the same, Helene, to you and your family. Merry Christmas. And
thank you.
I'm sure we'll talk soon here.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, you take care.
Talk to you later.
Take care.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
You're welcome.
All right, so you've heard from one of our long-standing readers and subscribers to our website at intensivecarehotline.com, who's sharing first-hand experience, what she's gone through with her mum in ICU, and I believe in LTAC at the time as well. So, you can heed that as a warning that whatever you are going through with your loved one, your alarm bells need to go off at all times, and you need to take charge and control from day one, and you need to ask the right questions from day one. So that's where I want to leave it today. I will do another YouTube live next week, Sunday 11:30 a.m. Sydney, Melbourne time. That's Saturday evening, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. 4:30 Pacific time, and I believe it's in the middle. It's half an hour past midnight in the UK. So I look forward to seeing you there. I haven't chosen the topic yet for next Sunday, but look out this week. I will set it all up for the next YouTube live. It'll be something that's relevant for everyone. Again, it'll be something that I talk to clients about, that we get all the time, and we will discuss here on the live stream. Now, if you have a loved one in intensive care, go to intensivecarehotline.com, call us on one of the numbers on the top of our website, or simply send us an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com. Also, have a look at our membership for families in intensive care at intensivecaresupport.org. There you have access to me and my team 24 hours a day in the membership area or via email, and we answer all questions intensive care related there. If you need a medical record review, contact us as well. We can do a medical record review in real time by getting access to online medical records, or by helping you getting access to medical records. Or we can also review medical records after intensive care, especially if you suspect medical negligence. I would appreciate if you subscribe to my YouTube channel for regular updates for families in intensive care and intensive care at home. share the video with your friends and families, click the like button, click the notification bell, and comment below your questions and insights from this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com. Take care.